Next, the gentleman who set a record for a mile run this morning in Washington, D.C. from Illinois, Mr. Casten, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You looked much better and well coiffed when I saw you this morning than I was. Nice to see you again, Chair Powell. Just briefly on the Basel III reforms, you and I have talked about the tax equity provisions and the fact that clean energy tax equity got a 4 times risk weighting relative to other tax equity in the last version. If there is a reproposal, can you give us any visibility on whether clean energy tax equity will go back to the 100% risk weighting that it's historically had?
So I'm not going to give any specifics out today because, the usual arrangement is nothing's agreed till everything's agreed. So I don't want to get into what the specifics are. I'm hopeful that the 3 agencies can come out, pretty soon with the whole package.
Okay, well, the sooner even something temporary, because there are a lot of banks that want to participate that are I think more cautious than they need to be right now. Appreciate that. In 2021, I think you were a part of the FSOC report on climate-related financial risk that for the first time identified climate change as an emerging threat to U.S. financial stability. Do you still agree with that conclusion?
The conclusion being that what again?
That climate change was an emerging threat to U.S. financial stability.
Yeah.
Okay. I raise that because I've been troubled, as you know from some of the letters we've written, by this April Bloomberg report that said, number one, that Fed officials were pressuring the Basel Committee to make disclosures of banks' transition plans optional, and that succeeded. Number two, that the Fed, OCC, and FDIC were pushing to limit implementation of the Basel Committee's climate risk management principles to remove financed emissions. And number three, that the U.S., unlike other countries, did not propose that any of its banks be subject to an analysis of how they incorporated climate in their credit risk assessments. Have any representatives from your agency attempted to weaken the Basel Committee's work on climate risk, including by expressing concern about the Basel Committee overstepping its mandate with respect to its climate work?
Well, I guess I would say it this way. The Fed does not have a mandate of fostering an energy transition or dealing with climate change. Some of the Northern European banks feel that they do. They actually have that. It's in their mandate, either explicitly or implicitly, but we don't.
But if we agree that climate change is an emerging threat to the stability of the banking system, are you saying you're not acting on it because you don't have the authority, or you're not acting on it because you disagree with what you said in 2021?
When you say it's and I agree, there's an emerging threat to financial stability, that's over time. I think looking to the banking agencies to lead the fight on climate change is a big mistake. I think it's a job for elected people. We don't have that mandate in the United States. We can do a very limited thing, which is make sure that the institutions we supervise are aware of and can manage those risks. We are not going to be the ones who are forcing them to adopt plans to transition and that kind of thing. That's just not going to happen through the banking agencies without a law change.
So then if it is the view of the rest of the world that climate change is a financial risk and we're going to regulate our banks, is it the view of the Fed that the U.S. G-SIBs should not be required to report?
Again, we're not going to be climate policymakers at the Fed. We are not going to do that. We don't have that mandate. A key to our independence is that we stick to the job you've given us. And the idea that we should discover climate and say, okay, we're going to lead the fight on climate, we do. If we're going to do things like that, we should be part of the Treasury Department.
Well, so to be clear, no one's under the illusions that you're the EPA. But I spoke with Janet Yellen about this yesterday. We have multiple states where the insurance industry is collapsing. Something like, as you know well, something like a third to 40% of U.S. wealth is tied up in real estate. And okay, U.S. homeowners are not G-SIBs, but in the 2008 financial crisis, we had risk that moved out of the G-SIBs onto other entities' balance sheets, and we said, well, we're not responsible because it's an insurance company. Well, we've fixed that. You do now have a mandate if there's systemic risk in the system. And so the question is, if we know that risk is moving through the system, is the FSOC monitoring that risk, or is the FSOC's view that if I'm not allowed to look at it, I'm not going to look at it, and it's somebody else's problem? Because somebody else is the person sitting here. right?
I mean-
We're going to be accountable if that risk comes when those chickens come home to roost.
Well, the banks know their risks pretty well, and you see the banks and the insurance companies pulling back from lending in coastal areas and things like that.
No, I agree, but where are they offloading that risk to? If they're putting, we've seen them putting it onto Fannie and Freddie. We've seen Fannie and Freddie try to put it onto the reinsurance industry. The risk doesn't go
Gentlemen's time is
away.
up.
We don't regulate them.
Gentlemen's time is up.